at you from the Exodus headquarters in Ohio. Let's jump right into today's episode.
Here we are at Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Great American Outdoor Show. We are chilling out here in the archery hall with Mr. Cody D'Acquisto, Chad, and myself. How's it going?
Good. It's going good. The show has been booming, as usual. Had a good first couple days. I mean, it's definitely a grind, but that's what we're here for. So.
Day 3, man. It's still early. Early.
Not even a third of the way yet. It's a 10-day show.
9 days, 10 days, something.
Yeah. So it
is wild.
Man, it's a long show, but it's great to get everyone under the same roof here. And after 10 days, it's a little tight. This little row down here is kind of a tight-knit family by the end of the show.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep, in the archery hall. I never realized how big the show was. I mean, even like being here before, I never walked the show. It's always so busy, so I never get a chance. But I did a lap earlier, and there's a lot of stuff. I mean, there's a lot of stuff
Dude,
here.
it's giant. I don't know how anybody comes here in one day.
You can't.
And walks the whole thing.
Yeah, you could.
I think that's why they got it for 9 days. But
yeah, it's hard on the vendors, good for the folks to come out here. But one of my favorite things about this is able to pick other people's brains. And I didn't realize kind of your track record the last 12 years here. You said 15 over 160. That's a lot of big deer.
24 Pope and Young?
Yeah. I got quite a few on the wall. Been, just added hard ever since I started. It's a progression, just constantly raising that bar and wanting bigger deer. But, just working at it, I guess.
Well, the crazy thing is, like, dude, you're only 28. Like, guys go their whole hunting career.
Oh, my gosh.
And don't kill that many deer. Like, I look at myself, 4 years without a freaking bow kill. Looking at how long I have left to hunt, like, there's only 30 years, 35 years. Like, in Ohio, $1 state, if I don't go out of state, like, that's only an opportunity at 35 more deer.
Mm-hmm.
You've already got that under your belt at 28.
Yeah. I mean, it started out as like this. Well, it's weird, the whole whitetail addiction thing. Well,
mm-hmm.
I truly look. It is like an addiction, man. I mean, and at first it was. I remember the goal was like to kill that one good buck, and then for a while there it was okay. One good buck, and then next year I'm going to kill a really nice buck again, and just I had that same mindset. And then when it started becoming easier to kind of put the puzzle together and pick things apart, then it was like, okay, well, man, if I could kill this buck and I could get to that state, I could do it all again. And then it became like an obsession as far as that goes too, to get to new states and which is tough, man. Especially when then you start. But I never wanted to be that guy that was always like, well, I need to kill bucks in 4 states, because then you start to. I feel like a lot of times you start to settle for lesser deer. And I spent a while there, in that high one or that 160 range, and until I really started to raise that bar, so I was able to stack quite a few in that range. But
yeah, and I think it's important to kind of quantify the amount, because I think people see your last name, they see all the bucks you kill, but I don't think people really realize necessarily how consistent and the quality of deer that you're able to put down year in and year out.
Yeah. It's cool. It's cool to look at. I mean, I try to, it sometimes doesn't even resonate too. Like, and then we started talking about like, a couple months ago on some other podcasts, but like, time of year, like this versus this, and started thinking, well, man, okay, well, there's all these bucks, and and mostly in October, early season, so it's kind of it's just weird how it all lays out and to think about it, but yeah, I guess quite a few.
Yeah, that is a lot. One thing before we get too far in the podcast, I want to bring up something we released in September, October, and I just want to clear the air that we appreciate you sitting down, and it was 2 friends that. It was an old friend that was interviewing there.
Previous interview on YouTube.
Yeah. And I think people maybe took the wrong spin on that, and it was just 2 dudes like having a bro conversation, not necessarily an interrogation, what some people thought.
I will say this: if people heard some of the other conversations that Matt and I had over like the years, I mean, we get pretty wild. I mean, I think it's actually funny, but I think it was last year at Harrisburg, we got in such a battle over Nickelback, the band. Like you
I was present for that.
You would have thought like you were like, dude, these guys are mortal enemies. Like it was But yeah, so to that point, you know, we've had a few crazy conversations. So yeah, definitely no hard feelings on anything like that. So
yeah, I just wanted to clear the air, and I don't know. There's a lot of keyboard warriors out there, so
yeah, I gotta go back and watch that, man. I gotta check it out one of these times.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's talk a little bit about 2019. I know you had a pretty full season as always, but do you just want to touch a little bit about 2019? I know you connected with an awesome buck in October, and maybe tell us what you haven't spoken much about before.
Yeah, so it was a pretty good year. You know, in the midst of field testing all these new products that we got out with on the custom gear side of things, I was definitely really hitting it hard in early October, trying to put one down before the bucks got squirrely. So that was, main goal coming into the season was, kind of get some inventory, get some intel of what was going on right away, locate a good one, and put them down as quick as possible. So, it took a few weeks. It wasn't a real quick process. There was a few borderline deer, and with kind of the style or the way I do things, I don't spend too much time there in the summer, so I don't really know what I got until it's time. So there's always that first few days there of kind of getting out there, getting my feet wet, and seeing what deer are living there. So that was kind of like the biggest part at first. When I did get that deer down, obviously it takes a load off a little bit, and you can kind of reset, and maybe probably got a little too lax this year, like than I typically would. Typically I'm like boom right on the next one, but with a lot of other things going on too, I was definitely a little more lax, let's say, but went on to have an awesome season for the time I got out. I ended up missing a deer in November. It was just a stupid situation, just a bad shot on my part, and would have been. I actually ended up finding that deer dead, and he was well over 170, so that would have been real cool to kind of seal
Put
the
down
deal.
Two
on,
170s.
Yeah, 2 170s in a year. And then late season too, I missed another one. Missed another big 8 that probably would have been upper 60s. So it was just but and a lot of guys are like, oh, you missed one? I'm like, yeah, man. I like that shit happens, man. It happens actually more often than you'd think with me, but might say something about my shooting.
Maybe.
Yeah, it was funny because I was just talking to a guy here. Like you said, everybody mingles, everybody talks, and the dude was like, man, we got to set you up with a peep sight. We got to get you like all dialed in. And I'm like, oh yeah, I don't know, or because he's like, well, what kind of setup you got? And I'm like, oh, well, I just got this and this. And he's like, wait, you ain't shooting a peep, or you ain't shooting this, or you ain't doing this, or you don't got to. And I'm like, no, man, I just shoot kisser button and mostly sort of instinctive. Like everything is so close. It's like half the time you don't even remember aiming. So it's like one of those deals where I just got to switch gears and start to try and improve for myself for the future years to capitalize better.
Yeah, that's frustrating, but it's probably humbling, and everyone goes through it.
Yeah. And I honestly think those times are what really keeps you back in the woods. Like just the anger and like the frustration of that happening, and like God, and just trying to get that next shot. Like I'm gonna redeem myself, and it definitely it gets even the worst for me, man, is when you get in like that pitfall, like, and then it's like just bad luck after bad luck, and you just got to try and keep hammering and overcome it. So, but yeah, it is what that's happening to everybody, I believe.
Mm-hmm. So you missed 2 other deer. How were you getting on those deer at that time of year? I know in the summer you necessarily don't do a ton of boots on the ground scouting, or at least September. I assume you let your camera soak throughout that time.
Yeah.
Yep. But walk us through how you got on those other 2, possibly.
The one that I found dead here, or the mid-season that I missed, that was a rut buck. So it was, it was one of those deals where it was November. I had access to a very good river system that them bucks just run. I think they run those things like highways, those rivers, train tracks, any sort of like gauntlet type scenarios with like hedgerows of timber, and it's almost like a highway for them bucks to run. So I knew that, coming in November, I'd have a good shot hanging around this river system to catch a roamer, if you will, because I had hunted this piece now for a couple weeks, bounced around, had a couple cameras out, wasn't really getting much intel, so I was just sticking to those areas that I knew something, or I already had my tag filled in the other state, so it was one of those deals where I was just waiting for a roamer. So I went in blind one morning to a woodlot, like right on this river, had a really good wind, and I no sooner hung my stand, like 20 minutes later, I'm sitting in there looking around. I'm like, man, this looks like a killer spot, And then I, as soon as I said that, I remember looking over my shoulder and just seeing this tank just coming through all the low brush right on the creek bank, and I'm like, oh my God, it's going to happen, like boom, like. And so so that was just setting up on those kind of rut corridors, and I think I've even talked about this in the past, but I hardly have any luck in November. It's always stuff like this. So I think I tend to overthink it.
Mm-hmm.
So this year I took more of an approach to just like, okay, just don't overthink it. Get in spots that bucks are going to come through, and I ended up getting on one.
So you were set up on that deer, or kind of located that deer off of past history with certain areas, not necessarily cameras in that scenario.
Yep. And this was a scenario that I just and I didn't even have any cameras in that area. Like when I went to this farm, I hung a couple cameras. I think it was like 3 cameras, just in like primary scrapes or just good little spots that look good on the outsides of the timber, hoping to just get honestly just to get a picture of one.
Right. So just inventory purposes at that time.
Just to if I get a picture of him working that scrape, well, I know he's at least checking this woodlot for does or doing whatever. So then I'd at least know he was in the area and have record of him instead of just wishing something was there but yeah, so I did that, and then that buck ended up being just a good rut area to be in.
How many cameras do you run, roughly?
So I think this year I had out before or right at the season opening, I had 3, and what I did was I already sort of knew. Now this is kind of a weird scenario. So I glassed a decent buck off the road on this area of the farm. So like even coming into the season, I was like, oh, he's a good buck. I want to see what he looks like. So I just went straight to this area. Like if I was trying to cover more area, I think I might have ran more than 3. I don't think I've ever ran more than like 6 cameras at a time. I just pretty much sprinkle them out and trickle them in areas that I can get to easy and that I can just get pictures to see what's going on.
Not very intrusive. In that scenario, 3 cameras on a specific deer to just make sure that he's sticking to his home range, making sure he's in the area, and then the rest is boots on the ground.
And this was probably like, now I'm thinking about it, maybe, so let's see, we got 300 probably. Maybe like 600 acres, right? So like there's this like chunk of property, 600 acres. Kind of had an idea, and I spread those 3 on like the perimeter of the 600 acres, so I could see what was going on. And I talked to a lot of people, like they always ask me, like, oh, do you hang? I've never hung a camera on a bed, or never hung it in a bedding area, or never hung it even like near a bedding area. It's more so like the busting around, like instead of I never wanted to go in there, I'm a big advocate of like, okay, seizing the moment, if you will. Yeah. So like instead of getting a camera in there and then having him find out the camera, I'd rather have him find out me and then me get a shot at him or kill him. So I always, even if I know where they're bedding, and it'd be nice to have a picture, but I creep off that and then just because I know they're going to become.
There's no reason to. If the likelihood or percentage is high that he's bedded in an area, there's no reason for you to put a camera and just go in and hunt the damn spot.
Yeah. Yep.
See it with your eyes.
Yep. But even to that too, like a lot of people I think they go in early before they can hunt, and they're setting this up like almost like, okay, well I'm gonna go in there to get intel. And I know we talked about this like yearly. Like I do know other people though that set that in there early and just leave it and never touch it. Now that I think is probably a smarter way to go about it.
Yes.
And then I would just go in there and maybe hunt it once or twice.
Mm-hmm.
Not even pull the camera. Just leave that there. Get your whole, like you said, get your year's worth of intel. I've never done that, but a couple years ago, I always like my camera, the times I'll use camera will be more frequently in October, like we talked about before, and then it'll just like trickle down to like the point where I don't check them, the batteries become dead, they're just out there. And a couple years ago, I actually, by accident, had cameras that were just out there that I never check. Like sometimes I just don't even, I get on some sign, I forget about them, forget they're there, and I remember pulling it and actually looking at the camera though, in a year span, and it was pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Like I was like, oh shit, like just seeing like, you know, never having that break in information, you know, so like, you know, and it was pretty cool. Like I seen 5 or 6 different bucks, and like one of them was a shooter, and I'm, oh, where did he come from? And I started surmising a lot of stuff from that, you know, and
right. Well, the good thing about that strategy, leaving those things 365 and collecting like the annual data and creating those data logs for, you know, the annual patterns is you're not negatively influencing that by going in and checking with pressure.
Yep. So,
I mean, that's a big deal. That's something we talk about a lot, that, you know, when you're running a lot of cameras, like what we're doing, it sounds crazy, but when things, with all outside influences remaining the same, so, and weather being equal, so pressure, food, habitat, we see these deer doing the same things, you know, year over year over year, and it's
wild.
It's crazy.
Do you see a lot of activity on your cameras in November when you go back, or are they still out there? Because
okay, that's a good question. Like now, I do, but it's sporadic because my cameras are purely on like that moment, like what I see. Mm-hmm. So even if like if I go up to a field edge, and I might know that like, okay, there's always a primary scrape that lights up here in late October, but there's a scrape like 200 yards over that's fresh, I'll hang it on the fresh scrape. So I don't get it's always current where I'm putting the camera. So like I'll get like those sporadic, like, you know, nice bucks that cruise through, and then just, you know, oh, that was a cruiser that came through. But honestly, I don't do a good enough job of that. There's cameras by that time, and when the season's over, like I sort of shut it off. And I have chips that I never even looked at. Like even from this year, I just pulled like 4 cards from a farm I was hunting out of state, and I don't even know where I put those chips. I know one of them is in a zipper pocket on my jacket, and the other, like those 4 cameras that I had this year, the other 3 I have no idea where the hell I put them. And I was thinking about that because my buddy was like, "Oh, what'd you have on the cards on that farm?" And I'm like, I didn't check them yet. I didn't have my computer down there. I just pulled the cards or pulled the cameras, and so I don't even know. So I dropped the ball a lot like that. So to whereas I probably could have got some good intel, I didn't.
That's so funny to me. As far as I don't know, it's
just camera pictures.
Yeah. I think that we rely on data a lot more than we're not as capable of putting those pieces together as quickly as you. And for whatever reason, we're still in the learning process of trying to connect those dots, and I need those SD cards.
Well, and that's a cool thing too. But like, you know, you get into that mindset. Like, well, I try and think about it a lot like that because, you know, every year I'm learning so much more. You know, so every year I try and dive into a different area of hunting, or try and, like, you know, dissect a part of hunting that I've been burned on in the past, and I definitely try and you know, key in on those things. And I do think, you know, I could utilize cameras a lot more than I do. My fear though is like, and I did it right when cameras got like more popular, I guess, and that was maybe around the time, a couple of years after I started hunting, but I got to a point where I started relying on the camera too much.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And then I started, like, I think that was one of the only years that I didn't kill a buck, was when I was really, like, I'd go out there, religiously check the cameras, take what the cameras told me, and then I based my hunting, like, purely off of that. Like, I figured, okay, I got a bunch of cameras out, I know what's going on. Like, I know what's going on in this woodlot, I know what's going on over here, like, and I would use that for my, like, you know, just my operation, how I was going to go about hunting. And then I ended up, like, going all season, not getting one down, and then I finally, like, sort of just, like, okay, like, started gravitating back to what I know. And then I got on a deer, and I was chasing them for the rest of the season, learned a bunch, you know, and it ended up being, you know, it was an awesome year all in all. But so that's why I think I stray away from that. But, you know, knowing even things like that, like
Well, they can definitely cause.
Yeah, they can ruin your season.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You can.
Yeah.
And
I've. Go ahead.
No, sorry. I don't even know.
Well, one of the worst things is, like, for me, like, sometimes in the past, like, I get romantic about a certain deer. Like, you get a picture of a certain deer and you fall in love because it's a giant and it consumes you. When in all reality, that deer could not be even killable.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's probably dead. Well, I think all deer are killable. It's just, do you have access to where you can kill them? You know,
it's good to validate that.
It's what's that?
Like, yeah, it's good to clarify. And
like, you know, and that was always something. But what was I going to touch on? You just said
all deer are killable.
Yeah, before that. Like you get hung up on that. Like, will you get hung up on past stuff? Like, dude, that's a big thing. Like, a lot of times I'll get like a picture or even like a big buck on a scrape or something or this or a past year. And that's one thing that I just make sure to reset, not to let that take too much account into what I'm trying to do, like in the here and now, because, dude, I think it's only natural to start spots where either you got a camera picture or you had a tree stand or you had a good encounter or an awesome hunt. Like, I know guys who had awesome hunts like 5 years ago, and that's the first place they go every year. And it's like, yeah, you could have an awesome hunt there again, like, but it's just one of those things where they're like those memories, man. You can't fight it. It's like, you know, it was an awesome time, and they wanna recreate that time. But definitely that can be a crutch, or that can cripple you.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a season, and they go by fast, man.
Very
dude.
fast.
Before you know it, you're like, where the hell did October go? Where did November go? You know, and then you're like, oh my God, I got 4 weeks left. Like, what the hell is happening? You know, so.
Yeah, once Thanksgiving hits, it's like, where in the world did the last 2 months go? And the best is behind us probably at that point, depending on weather. But
yeah.
One thing I want to ask, I know obviously you don't rely on cameras a whole bunch. I know you've ran some of our cameras, and then obviously I know your dad has developed a camera as well. What do you look for in a camera? Anything particular? And I know you're not necessarily a gear junkie on a lot of things. For obviously like the portable stand stuff, I know you're very specific in that. But talking about your archery tackle, you're kind of whatever works for you. But I don't know if you have a thought process behind that.
I do. And so with cameras, and like, even I remember the day I met Chad and Matt, and I remember just thinking to myself, like, you know, having a bunch of cameras that I had problems with, or this or that, and some work great, and I never cared about megapixel. I never cared about any of the specifics on a camera, because when I use them, like, I am not making a giant mural of this buck picture. I don't care if it's 27 megapixel or if it's 0.5 megapixel. If I can I want to hold that thing. Like, so I'm using the camera as a tool to just let me know if that deer is like something I want to get or want to go after. So I never got into that. Never got into the. And then I'm sure there's stuff that I could dive into, but never got into any of the specific functions. Not even video. Like, I don't use video ever. I just set it on the lowest megapixel it can go, so I get the most out of the battery life, which I think that's a good assumption. And I'm just trying to get those intel pictures.
Yeah.
So when I met them, and they told me, like, I think that was the first year you guys launched, right? That was when we met.
That was probably
you guys were in the new
2015, probably.
Yep. And so they just launched, and they're telling me, and they're like, yeah, we got a 5-year warranty, and I'm like, well, that's kick-ass. I'm like, I didn't know anybody else that was warrantying their camera for 5 years. So I was like, well, shit, that's awesome. Like, I got cameras that take a shit on me constantly, So that's definitely awesome to look for in a camera. But for me, it's like, I just need
the damn things to work.
I just need that picture. Yes, I just want to make sure it works, because so many times too that I've been to cameras and got there, and for some reason it didn't take pictures, or it took 7,000 pictures in the first 2 seconds and then shut off. So there was always a lot of that stuff I was struggling with. And we had some expensive cameras. We had some cheap cameras and all that. So, when what I look for in a camera, just like same thing with a bow. Like you're talking about like archery tackle, I just want something that's going to kill that deer. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not trying to make crazy 89-yard shots through a I don't know, a hula hoop and a ring of fire. It's like one of those deals where I shoot it, I'm on at 20 yards, I don't shoot it anymore. Like, I just, as long as it's working, it's good. Up until a couple of years ago, I was still using the old Lobo, which was, like, I think Dad designed in 2005 with some dart and archery components, and I mean, dude, that thing was behind the times as far as bows go. And I still don't know anything about bows, but talk about an 87 Civic, so it's just one of those things where if it's work and it's getting the job done, that's like my main focus.
Yeah. Well, I think that's applicable really to your style too, because you pride yourself in boots on the ground scouting, being able to read deer sign, make moves in the moment, put yourself on deer in close, tight situations.
Yeah.
And that's a skill set. That's a skill set that I don't have. A skill set that a lot of people, look up to you in a manner because you're able to have that success.
Yeah, it's weird to think of. Yeah. I've always been from day one been obsessed with getting as close as I can. For some reason and I remember the first deer I ever shot was 6 yards away, and I just remember that deer came in and everything about the situation, it was just awesome, and then the year after that, that's how I was subjected to it. I don't even remember hunting a lot of field edges. Even that first year I started hunting, I hunted with the old man, and when I really didn't know anything I was doing. But it was just it was something I got into right off the bat. And then it became man, how close can I get to these deer? And it was just something. And then I started hunting just tracks, and on a trail, one lane, in thick cedars. And it's one of those things where you're just literally sitting there. And if you ain't ready when his head's there, you're done. I specifically, a couple years ago, I had this deer pinned down, and it was a nice buck. He had to be, he was 170 class easy. And this was about 4 years ago. I had him pinned down on one trail. And I remember it took me 3 moves to get him, but I seen him. I kept getting a glimpse of him, and I got a glimpse of his cage through all this thick, gnarly stuff, and I just kept moving closer and moving closer. And I told myself, I'm all right, and I went, found his track. I got right on where he was actually going in, and I was, trying not to press the situation, but I got there, and I was sitting. I set up a stand in a cedar tree that was probably 5 feet off the ground, not bullshitting, eye level with the deer, just super low. And this was one of the, and I told myself, Cody, you sit there with that bow on your knee, and if you can sit here till 10 o'clock, this deer is dead, and you'll be home for dinner tomorrow, with the family. So I'm all right. So I'm and that in my mind, that was it. That's all I had to do. So I get in there before daylight. I knew this was going to happen. I'm sitting there, sun comes up at 7 or whatever, and I never sit past 9:15. But this deer was running late, so I'm going to give it all the chance in the world. I can't move a damn muscle. I'm literally sitting there. I think it was 9:49, and I'm he ain't coming. And then I started second guessing my setup, and I started second guessing what I was doing, and there was the trails that I had hunted the previous 2 days, because there was good tracks on all those trails. So I had hunted, this was my third move in, so I started thinking, fuck, he probably went behind me today, probably took a different trail, and then I started thinking, shit, he could be behind me right now. What am I doing? Why did I not even look behind me all morning? I heard shit. Why didn't I look behind me? And I literally looked over my right shoulder. And I was looking for, I'm not shitting you, a 3 count, a 1, 2. Came back over, that buck was looking me in the face at 4 feet this. Looking me and took the fuck off. And I was I threw my bow onto the ground, got out of the stand, left and went home, and I didn't hunt for a couple days. I was just so pissed that I second guessed what I knew was going to happen. He should have just stuck it out. He would have been dead, And then I just became even since then, just obsessed with getting super close to these deer, and nothing's like watching that arrow go through the chest cavity at 3 paces. It's just it's a really cool feeling, and to beat them that close, with how good their senses are, and seeing them come in and them ears going crazy, and seeing the hair on them really standing up and you're that close. Especially when it's cold, that steam coming out of the nose and stuff. It's just awesome, It's and that element of surprise, when that deer gets
oh shit moment,
when he gets shot and he runs it's and you're sitting there dude, that thing didn't even have a clue. I've shot in so many deer that literally run off and they're what happened? You can see it, they're this, and then they fall over 15 yards away, and it's just dude, that's the ultimate kill, the ultimate. It's just that's what's got me all like just fired up, just to recreate that moment, you know. Yeah, so it's cool. It's cool being close. Try it.
I should.
Yeah,
awesome.
I do love that like the
dude, it's
crispy morning.
Man, it's like, you know, everything. Like, you know, you're that low, you're that in there, you know, and a lot of guys. I'm sure the guys hunting on the ground feel the same way, but you know, and I don't know. I think a lot of those guys are maybe taking a little longer pokes, but them recurve guys on the ground are getting close. But yeah, everything from the crunch of that leave. You know, you come in, you know. I remember having, like, you know, good bucks too, even working scrapes and trees that I was sitting, and I'm literally like sitting on the licking branch, like the branch is coming, like touching the platform, so I can feel all that like through the platform as they're like hitting it. It's just awesome, insane. You know. But yeah, it's definitely a different feeling altogether, and it's just, dude, it's like, it's addicting, man. It's wild.
I can understand. That's pretty next level.
It's cool. It's just a different, it's just one of those things that I've always liked, and then I keep trying to get closer and closer. And I don't know, it was funny because this last year, Dad actually came into I was at the farmhouse for dinner, and he came into the house after hunting or after scouting one day or something, and he's like, and this was at the home farm in Iowa, and he's like, man, man, you're losing it. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, I was scouting this area. He's like, and I found a good spot. He's like, and I see you. He's like, and I seen you had to stand there. He's like, and then I seen you had to literally step down to get in it. And he's like, oh, I ain't ready for this shit right now. And it was literally this hill rolled down into a CRP field with all like immature cedars, and you like. The stand was literally like under the ground, like you had to like step down into it, and it was in this tiny little cedar tree like this, and there was one beat trail coming across a wide open CRP field that cut it at like 5 yards. And I remember sitting in that thing just like this, like just bow in hand, and I mean I had like probably like 120-inch buck literally come and put his nose like, and as soon as he put his nose like on that bow, he flipped shit like he but I mean I remember he took the trail, you know, and caught my eye, you know, after, right, you know, he's eye to eye, and it was just funny. He's like, I wasn't ready for a stare down that night, so I didn't do that. He's like, but, so it's, you know, I'm just always pushing the, I guess, the trying new things, you know, just, and I like being a stand. So yeah, I could have just stood next to that cedar or stood behind it, but like something about that tree stand, I don't know, it was kind of cool. I thought it'd make a really cool like video if I did kill it, or if I did kill a good one, and then showing that the height of that stand. I think people get a kick out of it. They probably think I was lying.
It'd be hard to believe without seeing it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's I took a I think Matt was there, and I showed Matt that setup, and he was like, what the heck? He's like, what are you even doing? And I was like, well, a good buck was coming down that trail, you know? And that was the only thing I could get in. It was like, you know, an open CRP, chest high CRP, and there's all these little sporadic immature cedars.
Well, I think there's some merit behind that. You know, I watched Matt shoot that deer in Shawnee off that set, you know, we were 8 feet off the ground.
Yeah.
Shot that deer 5 steps away from the tree, and we were in trees maybe 5 inches in diameter. I
remember getting a call from Matt, and he was like, dude, he's like, you'll never believe it. He's like, just like you said, man, it was a tiny tree, and we weren't even that high. He's like, and it was me and Chad. You know, I was like, dude, I'm telling you, I was like, you got that wind right. You know, you got the right ambush point. I mean, it's, you know, that's the more important part to it.
You think some of those deer, you know, as they mature and put some age on them and have different experiences, do you think they avoid timber to a point? Like, do you think they feel more secure in places?
I think it all depends what that buck goes through. I mean, you know, if you were going to the corner store every day and you're getting beat up, would you frequent that? Somebody who's kicking your ass every day, you came out and stealing what you bought, you'd probably stop going to that corner store. So I think that's along the lines of like, hey, let these guys grow up, man. Let them hang out in these areas, you know, deer are bedding. And not that I agree with these sanctuaries, because nothing is that sacred on any piece of ground that I hunt. But out of season, I don't fuck with them at all. Like, you know, and it's just the thing, like, well, if you keep bumping a deer and keep bumping a deer, it's just one of those things. Like, well, why do they want to deal with it? They just want to hang out. I mean, they're not. Well, that's how I look at it. You know, they don't. You keep pushing them and keep pushing them and keep pushing them. Well, then they're going to leave. You know. So yeah, I mean, I have seen old bucks, that weren't hardly even going in the timber. a buck I killed a couple years ago that was like more of like a cull buck, that one with the giant like troopy side, and was a giant in his day, but he got to like 8-9 years old, and I'm thinking like, okay, so he was literally bedding out in CRP just like that, and he was just skirting this one finger, and that's the only place like he wasn't bedding in the timber, he wasn't eating in the timber, like he was out in the open CRP, and then he'd go out to the ag, and then he'd come in, and there was just one little finger that he was skirting close enough to, and I got on that finger and killed him. But it was pretty dang easy to figure out. I mean, he was old, he was doing that same thing. I knew he frequented that side of the property for years, and I remember I was talking to Matt. I remember like I didn't have anything to hunt. I was super bummed out, and Matt's like, "Why don't you kill that old deer?" And I was like, yeah, I could. I was like, and then I remember texting him like 2 days later. And I'm like, Matt, I'm gonna go kill that old deer. And then like a day and a half later, I like 2 sits later, I was like, yeah, that deer's dead, Matt. I sent him a picture, and he's like, what'd you do? He's like, and he always gives me shit. He's like, what'd you do? How'd you get that deer? And I was like, I just went over there, looked at what was going on, and set 2 stands, and he was dead. I mean, like that was an easy, predictable deer, man. Just he ran shit too. Like, it was wild. Like, we're not people that do a lot of managing, like, or I'd never have, one of those deals where like, oh, I don't want to waste my tag, because then I'm out of the woods. Mm-hmm. Even like those years you fill up on October 1, there's like this soul crushing moment. Like, you're happy you got one, but then you're like, oh man. Well, I'm sure for you guys in Ohio, or you in Ohio, like, it's like, dude, that was your one buck,
That's it.
So it was like, we don't do a lot of that managing, but when I shot that deer, like days later, there was all sorts of bucks in there. Like, that deer was so old, and he had that area so locked down. Like, deer came in like rats. It was just weird, and they weren't all giant, but it just shows like that pecking order and that establishing all that sort of stuff, like mature deer. So it's kind of weird.
Man, you ever feel like you're in a classroom and
no,
you're not supposed to be in that class?
No,
I was like,
what?
It's like, I'm gonna go kill this deer in 2 days, and you go in and do it. Like, there's like an allure about the conviction that you have, because everything you're doing, you do with purpose, right? It's not like, hey, I'm gonna go out and hunt for a week. I'm going out to kill this. I'm going out to kill this deer on this day because this is the situation, and I know this is going to happen.
And it's awesome when you got everything dialed in like that. But where, and that's the thing too. Like, I got 2 different strategies. So if I know a deer's there, like that deer, like I said, I have sheds from that deer I have 7 sets of sheds.
Wow.
And when his first set that I found, he was like a 164 mainframe 8, like just a tank.
Yeah.
And then he turned into like, he had like a 6 side. He would have been a typical 12, but then just got this. He actually got shot in the leg by a shotgun hunter, and his leg was like this big. And it was one of those deals. So like, I knew where that deer was. I knew I wanted to target him. And then like you said, I went on everything with a purpose. I went and looked for that deer. And but a lot of times, there's a different strategy. Then there's just like that's a route 1, route 2 too. Like, okay, new piece of property. No cameras, have no idea. Like, there's also that, okay, I need to find deer. But then it's not just like, oh, I'm going to go hunt for a week in Missouri. It's like, okay, I'm going to Missouri to locate a buck that I want to shoot. It's like you said, almost that like mindset, trying to be as specific as you can and hone in as much as you can, or put in the time.
All with intention. I mean, and that's the biggest thing. You go in there almost methodical, surgical, because you've done your homework. And I think a lot of people view, aggressive hunting tactics, and they think they miss that whole part, and they just want to go in and be aggressive. Like, I think there's buck bed in there. I'm going in there tonight, and they haven't done those 2 sets prior to see what's going on.
Yeah, and that's a big thing too. A lot of guys will, hey man, they go out and they have that and that only in their mind about finding a bed and killing a deer on its bed, and like, to where it's like, finding a bed is great, but it's not always about that. Like, in that buck's position, like, or that one that I messed up on in such closer range, like, I didn't think to myself, when I seen the trail he was frequenting, I had a pretty good idea where he was bedding, and I could have went there, but like, why would I? I just watched him, or what I thought was him, or what I knew was a good buck, in daylight hours, walk down that trail. So like, why wouldn't I just kill him on the trail? So there is definitely a point in which I'll really get aggressive, but I mean, it's that's the whole thing. Define aggressive. Well, are you an aggressive hunter? Well, not always. I mean, it's like you said. I just try and keep it to where I convince myself, and there's a reason for doing everything, and whether that thing at the moment is being aggressive and finding or trying to locate a bed, or just leisurely hunting perimeters to see what I got. So it's and then time has something to do with it too. You take time into account. Who else is hunting the property? Is it do I have to worry about somebody else getting that deer before I do? Like, do I got to I mean, that all matters. And even you look at like even private pieces, like it's not public, but sometimes let's say you're hunting with 5 good hunters. Yeah. Like now, okay, so now you take like, okay, I'm hunting a piece of public. I'm trying to navigate around pressure and like people frequenting the area. Then you look at it a different aspect. Look at like, okay, I'm on a 2,000 acre lease with like 5 guys who got a shit ton of big deer on the wall. Like that's a thing in itself too. Like it's almost like, okay, like, you're not looking at it like that, but it's you gotta take that for an account. And everything about the scenario. What state, what type of ground. What you think the deer are doing, what you find out they actually are doing. Yeah.
The one thing with all these podcasts and all the content that's everywhere and all these people consuming all this, everyone wants like the shoebox answer. Mm-hmm. They want the process. They want step 1, step 2, step 3, and follow that and kill a deer every time. Like it just doesn't doesn't work that way.
It doesn't. But I do think like even these you hit it on the head. They want the same. They want the thing right there that's going to do everything. But in reality, I think it comes down to how much time are you willing to put toward it. Like how bad do you want it? I mean, then and there's a lot of factors that go into that. There's a lot of things that take up your time. Like deer hunting isn't all we do at that time of year. We got families, we got jobs, whatever. But to that point, I mean, you got when you really start putting the time into it and start, taking, I've never been a note guy, but I've always envied that, like guys who like keep journals. Like I'm like, oh, that's pretty rad. Like he knows exactly what happened on the 26th of October 6 years ago, and he can go back and read that. Like, and I always like sometimes like think like, man, I should be doing that, man. The things I'd have in that journal, I could probably go back and look, but like right there, it takes a certain guy to do that. Like, and that guy wants it. That guy wants it bad enough to where he's keeping a journal. He's hunting every day after work. He's hunting every weekend. He hunted the morning of his daughter's birthday. Like, that's the guy who's going to start killing big deer. And that's as much as I could say to generalize it is anything. Is like, want it bad enough and it will happen. I mean, it might not, it might take you a little bit to start consistently killing deer and really get what's going on. But if you're constantly putting yourself out there, constantly trying to learn, even like these things, I've just gotten into the podcast thing, listening to podcasts, trying to figure out some information, but then, it's the biggest thing. You got to decipher what you're hearing from what you actually know, and you got to learn for yourself. It's hard to grasp it. You can listen to all the shit in the world, but until you get out there, start seeing it and start correlating it for yourself, it's like getting in a street fight. You don't know. You can prep for that street fight all you want. You can hit that bag. You can hit that bag for hours until somebody's hitting you in the face. You're not really going to know what it's like to be in that fight. So get out there, man.
There's this thing where it's a small circle and it says what you know. And then around that it's like what you think you know.
Yeah.
And then the biggest circle is what you don't even know that you don't know. Like stuff that you don't know. And I think that's a big part of whitetail hunting as well.
Yeah, and it's like, dude, going into the season, going into every situation, like just trying to learn, staying open. Like never once, like when I find those scenarios where I think I got it, I think it's important to have confidence, but then not be overconfident. Like obviously, you never think you learned everything or you know everything. There's so much stuff that you can figure out. And like I said, man, every time I walk in the woods, I feel like I pick up something, and it's a correlation. Everything. Like look at you. Like I talk about that a lot too. Like that year that I didn't kill a deer was like the year I learned the most. Them couple you were chasing this year, like, dude, how much did you learn about that spot now? Is that probably going to happen to you in that spot again? No. And like even if you go to a different farm, like you're definitely going to use those pieces to your advantage. Like, yeah, and that sucks that you didn't get that one.
Yeah, I mean, you can have all the head knowledge at the end of the day,
Yeah,
but I mean, you have to experience it firsthand, and it sucks and it stings. But hopefully next time I'll be able to approach it a little bit better.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about, man. It's like progressing, keep getting better, keep an open mind, and that's kind of like the philosophy with the gadgets and stuff. Like you said, like you said, not a gear nut. I like my stand how I like it. I like my pack how I like it because it's like they're like two things I always take. But it's more so like, okay, what do I need? What do I need to get it done?
Mm-hmm.
What can I get rid of? And what helps the style I'm hunting.
Yeah, they keep. I think they're going to kick us out here this evening.
They're shutting her down.
But we can't thank you enough for sitting down here at the end of the show to
appreciate it.
Talk a little deer hunting, and we will link to all your social and XOP and Lone Wolf Custom Gear as well in the description. So make sure you go give Cody some love and follow him along, and we appreciate you hopping on here.
Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it.
Right
Anytime.
on,